What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of BassQuest. Today we are talking fall fishing again, and today we're specifically going to talk about schooling bass, and that's something that's really been going on right now. Let me go back over here so I can see what I'm doing here. Yeah, all right. One thing I've noticed all over the lake right now, and really all the lakes that I fish around here, Nickajack, Chickamauga, Watts Bar, there's a lot of schooling activity still. Even though we've had the first kind of winter cold fronts and things like that run through, there's still a lot of fish actively chasing bait and actively schooling. And one thing that can happen when we're talking about schooling fish is those fish can get pretty darn finicky and they can get difficult to catch. So today we're going to kind of break down what I do in order to find those bass, the baits that I throw to trigger them, and how I specifically try to target bigger fish out of those schools of fish. So hope y'all are ready. We're going to jump into it here. Let's see some chat questions over there. Make sure to want to see some questions going up. You guys have any comments or anything like that, make sure you post them up. All right, so running through kind of the first few things here, we're going to talk about some of the things that I do. So, all right, first thing when you're talking about schooling fish, I'm always looking for the location of those fish. Where am I seeing them? Where are the areas they seem to be piling up the most? Where are they actively schooling the most? And some of the things I do is you got to find those fish. One thing that we talked about in some of the previous videos, schooling fish in the fall are very transient. They're very bait fish oriented, so you have to really get out there and try to find what those fish are doing. So some of the things I do here, one thing that to note, I've got some notes here in front of me, but the bait often moves around throughout the course of the day. So when you're talking about schooling fish in the fall time, the bait is not necessarily in one spot all day long. What happens is the bait will kind of move around. I notice that it often will get out in the creek channels or secondary channels along the main river. Sometimes on the main river itself, the bait will get out there and kind of suspend in deeper water, and it's real inactive. What you'll notice when you're actually looking at these bait balls on the graph, I can always tell when they're active or not, or I should say if they're actively being chased or not. What I do is I look for those big giant balls of bait. If you see a big ball of bait, if it's got a good shape to it, by shape I mean like a big circle or an oval, there's a good chance that bait is not under any duress at all. In other words, they're not actively being pursued by predatory fish. A lot of times you'll see them kind of meandering out there in the middle of nowhere. So that's usually, I can key in on that and know right away that, hey, these fish are not in an active feeding mood around this particular area, but I know the bait's there. And so what I do during these kind of off parts of the day is I'll spend time graphing, looking at those fish, look at those bait fish, and then I'm looking, so where would the bass be? Where is that ambush point when that bait decides to make a move this morning or this afternoon? Where can I intercept where this feeding activity is going to occur? So one thing, we talk about, a lot of guys talk about, you hear on Bassmaster and stuff like that, find the bait and you find the fish. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you find the bait, you found the general area where the bait is. Now you got to figure out where in that area the fish are tending to be located. Another thing that I'm constantly doing during the kind of the more inactive parts of the day is I'm constantly scanning and looking to see where I can find active fish. So I'm looking out there for bait fish activity. I'm looking out there for any kind of sign that there is fish in that area. And I'm not only looking for that. So say there's all kinds of different little splashes and things that you'll see on the surface. I'm looking for bass specifically. So there's a specific sound that a bass makes when it's actively feeding. A lot of times you can see the fish itself. So just because you saw a little bit of activity doesn't necessarily mean anything. Is it gizzard shad rolling? Is it crappie rolling? Are there smaller white bass that are feeding, or are they smaller largemouth? So all these things kind of play in. You're looking for the activity, so once you find the activity, find the predatory fish, you kind of nail that area down. Well, then you want to kind of get in there, settle in, be fishing, but the whole time I'm thinking to myself, where are the bigger fish in this area? So that's always super important. You want to find the bigger fish there, and you want to make sure that you get a hold of them and try to catch the larger species. Because that's really what we're after. We want to catch the big bass. We don't want to go in there and necessarily catch all the smaller ones. All right, here we go. Now my chat's actually working, so I'm seeing some of what you guys are posting. Good, very good. Heath said something really smart on here. He said, find the birds, find the bait, find the fishies. And that's very, very true. So many times, if you can find those birds, they will show you, especially as the winter progresses, it gets colder and colder, we start to get more gulls, we start to get loons. They can really tell you in a heartbeat where those fish are. Alrighty. Now, one of the important things, I kind of touched on this a minute ago, when you're talking about fall fishing, a lot of times I kind of hinted at it a little bit in some of these videos and a little bit today, but there's specific feeding windows. So there's specific times when you're more apt to get these schools of fish to fire and to catch fish in the fall. So one of those times is first thing in the morning, and the other is right in the afternoon. Seems like it's very specific this time of year until we get into the real winter time. Then that kind of changes from the morning to the middle part of the day tends to be the best. But something special about the early morning and the late afternoon this time of year in the fall. And I think a lot of it has to do with playing the light. So when I get out there, I'm talking about playing the light. I'm thinking in my head about where I need to be set up as that sun is either rising or setting. The way that light changes, it changes rapidly as you start to lose light and as you start to gain light. And with that change, it seems like that for some reason, it's like a lot of these fish, I don't know if they can't see as well or what's going on, but a lot of times they're really prone to eating a bait or being fooled by something to where you can actually catch them, especially bigger fish. So I want to make sure I'm in the right kind of area once those prime times come. So that's what I was talking about before. During the down part of the day, the middle part of the day, I spend a lot of time graphing, spend a lot of time looking. And one thing that's important when we're talking, I was actually on the phone with Mikey Balls for a while the other day talking about this, but you know, when you're graphing, you're not necessarily seeing fish. You're seeing this bait that is not pressured. Then you're looking around, so where are the predatory fish? Well, you might graph around, you'll see some little schools of crappie or some little schools of white bass, but you're not seeing the bass the way you typically would. So many times, you never do until they actually decide to get up and feed. They lock down so close to the bottom that a lot of times you can't even really graph them. Sometimes on really hard bottom, you can run a side scan on there at just the right angle and you can catch the shadows just barely. Or you'll be in an area that you know there's no chunk rock and all of a sudden there'll be chunk rock there. So sometimes you can see them, but for the vast majority of the time, especially if you're not really familiar with the area that you're fishing, so many times you won't actually see them on the graph. You just have to kind of look around. You look at those main lake structures. I've done several videos on this before about identifying structures within the lake. So whether you're in the back of a creek searching for schooling fish back there or you're on the main lake on a big flat, so many times if you'll just look for those key structures. Let's go ahead and look at a couple areas here. I'm going to swap over. Wow, you guys get the cool crazy looking screen. Okay, we're going to go down to the lake. All right, we're on Chickamauga. Pow. All right, say we're looking at, in the back of Chester Frost here, we're looking at schooling fish. So we pull back here in the middle part of the day. So many times you can look at these little creek channels here. It's 18 to 20 foot range. That dotted line there, those are individual creek channels. That bait will just be sitting out there doing nothing. It'll be suspended. It'll be in really big balls of bait, and there's nothing going on. So I look immediately, what are the areas around here that should have fish on them? And it's pretty obvious right here. I mean, you can look, you see these wide open flat areas right here. A lot of times those are going to be shell beds. So you got a shell bed right here, you got a shell bed right here, and you got a little hump right here that's probably got a shell bed on it as well. So these little areas, that's where my bass are most likely going to be. Now sometimes it's too shallow to graph it. Sometimes if you graph it you don't see anything, but I know that is where my activity is going to happen. And so many times, first thing in the morning or late in the afternoon, you can watch these fish migrate from over here in the creek channels. The bait fish will pull in, and then all of a sudden you can actually see it occur a lot of times. You'll actually see that bait split up into smaller pods. So it might be 3 or 4 big pods back there. All of a sudden it's 10, then 15, then 20. Those are active predatory fish chasing those bait fish. You start to see them on your graph. The bait will start to get elongated and misshapen. So even if you're not marking as many fish, you know something's going on down there that's causing those fish to be uneasy. That's when a lot of times you start seeing bird activity and then fish activity as well. So What I'm trying to do early in the day is I want to get around here. I want to find out where the fish should be. I'm going to mark some of these locations, and then I'm going to come back and fish those during the prime time. And really that prime time for me is going to be that first hour and that last hour. And that, like I said, that whole hour I'm going to be sitting around and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm in the right area, but what is that magic spot? Where are the bigger fish located at this moment? I try to go there, and then I try to catch those bigger fish. What's up, Morgan? What's up, dude? We got Heath on here. There's no fish on shell beds, right, Heath? Yeah. Heath is a master of disaster on those shell beds in the back of Chester Frost, actually. Let's see here. What's up? What's up? What's up? Slab spoon. Randy Wilson says slab spoon. I've never used that. I don't even know what that is. I might look that up here in a second. All right, now we're going to talk about kind of the nature of fall schooling bass. And it's unique compared to a lot of the way fish school up in the springtime and a lot of the way fish school up in the winter and summer. Now, in the springtime, a lot of times you're talking about during the spawning cycle. So those fish, a lot of times, if they do pod up, they're in smaller pods, and they're relating by size. So you'll have a group of 3 or 4 really big fish, and there might be a group of 15 or 20 3 to 5 pounders, and there's a little bit bigger group of 30 really small fish. So many times it's schooled up by size. They're spread out more. They're up there staging to spawn. So it's a completely different mindset. In the summertime, in the wintertime, they're still actively feeding, kind of like they are in the fall. They're very heavily bait fish oriented often. But again, they're schooled up in big schools sometimes, but they're very size specific. Again, they're out there. There'll be small pods of really big fish. There'll be, slightly larger pods of medium sized fish, and so on and so forth. The fall is a unique time, and Tactical Bass has touched on this a lot of times, and I've actually noticed it myself the last 5-6 years or so. There's a huge biomass of fish that'll often occur in these feeding areas. So you get on these flats in the backs of creeks, you get on the flats that are out here in Main Lake. There's a huge biomass of fish. There's tons of different predatory species of fish out there, and they're all together. Really, they're all together more than I see them in any other part of the year. So being able to specifically pick out the bass is important, but being able to specifically pick out the big bass is even more difficult. And then getting those fish to trigger instead of other fish can be very difficult as well. So that's what we're kind of trying to do here, talk about that. So, but you have to understand that just because you're catching 1 pounders in an area doesn't mean you need to pick up and move locations completely. You just might not be keyed in on the right thing that's going to get that big fish to trigger. And that's what I'm going back to talking about. Looking, observing, you need to find the area you're seeing, first of all, the biggest blow-ups that are the right species of fish, the bass, and then you need to figure out what they're doing. So one thing that I do when I'm fall fishing is I bring an entire arsenal of baits. And I'm going to actually pull out a few baits here that I just pulled off of rods a moment ago, but I treat it almost like ledge fishing. A lot of times you see guys in the wintertime, they have 3 rods on deck. Well, in the springtime, they have 3 or 4 rods on deck. But in the summertime, when you're ledge fishing, you usually have, 7, 8, 10 rods on deck. A lot of times you got multiple crankbaits. You got big flutter spoons. You've got scroungers, just anything you think of, swim baits, football jigs. Well, I do the same thing in the fall. I have a lot of rods rigged up with a lot of baits that I'm confident in, and then I'm constantly out there cycling through. I'm trying to figure out what is the best thing to be using for those fish. So we'll go back over here to me. What are they actively wanting? And it's funny because it changes a lot day to day. So one thing that I always have rigged up in the fall time is one of Scott's rigs. So this is that 5-wire 8-blade. You've seen me on several videos lately catching a lot of fish on this bait, but I do a lot of different things to it. For one thing, I change out the blades. I think by doing that, sometimes I use a colored blade, sometimes it's chartreuse, sometimes it's white. I use different size blades on here just to get something different. And then I actually switch up my colors of my baits as well. I don't know if y'all can see that. I've got all kinds of different colored baits on there as well, different sizes. And I like a lighter rig in the fall. You can see here I've got 2 1/8 ounce heads, one 3/16 ounce head in the center as a keel. But that's one of the rigs I use. I start to, now that we're starting to get into cooler weather months, I actually start to use that harvester rig a little bit as well. I don't have that right in front of me right now, but that's one of the things I have rigged up. Another thing, y'all know me, I'm going to have a couple of them rigged up at any given time. It's a crankbait. These happen to be a couple of lipless crankbaits there. That's the Evergreen. That's the LV500. And you notice a theme here, natural colors. Look how natural those colors are. I think the natural colors make a big difference in the fall time because, again, these fish are pressured, they're finicky, they're easy to find. And here we go. Blade bait, the Mickey Volt right there. Awesome little blade bait. Steel shad is an awesome blade bait because sometimes they don't want the loud rattles. So you have to have an assortment on there. Sometimes I'll use a lipless that has no rattles in it. Another thing I always keep cranked up, I don't know if you guys have been watching Tactical Bass and a lot of people's videos. Alex Rudd did a great video the other day. Small body cranking is extremely important this time of year, but one thing that I like to do in these fall schooling fish is I go with a little bit bigger body. So this is actually an old Lucky Calf crankbait that's about the size of a Series 4 or a Series 5. And that just seems to key in about the right size bait fish that my bigger fish are wanting to key in on. Yes, Morgan's over there. He's saying he loves him some LV500. It is a hard lipless crankbait to beat. For one thing, you've got a 3/4 ounce bait in a small package. So if you're fishing those schooling fish, if you're hopping bottom or yo-yoing down in that 10, 12 foot range, that can be difficult to do effectively with a 1/2 ounce, like a 1/2 ounce red eye shad, for instance. So having that 3/4 ounce bait can be a very, very good thing to have. All right, now one of the kind of what's been an absolute killer on schooling fish, especially finicky schooling fish, the last few years has been small swim baits. And Scott has come up with an absolute money one right here. This is actually his new, that's the 3.5 spunk shad on his small scrounger. I believe that is a 2/0 hook. And you can see I take the bill that comes with it and I actually trim this thing down into a coffin shape. Gives it a little tighter wobble, and what really happens is in that colder water, you don't want that thing going crazy. It looks more natural when it's got a tighter wobble like that when you cut that bill down when you're starting to get in cold weather. Another thing is an open hook, or like you see here rigged on a small swim bait, but this is a 3.5 inch hollow body swim bait as well. Something like that, something really natural. Saudi Custom makes a really good one. But you can sit there, take that really natural presentation, and move it through those fish. Another thing I do, I don't have it right in front of me here, is Scott's, his War Pig, that underspin. If they want a little bit more flash, say there's just a ton of bait in the area, having that little underspin under there can make a big difference on the amount of bites you get because those fish can kind of differentiate what's going on. But one thing I try to do as well when I'm starting to target those bigger fish out of those schools, it's this dude right here. This is actually a 715 bait. It's designed to look like the old Bass Pro Shops. I guess it was called the Babe or the BPS swim bait or whatnot. But this is the same one that you saw in a couple of the Bassmasters, older Bassmasters, where I believe it was Robinos, whatever his name is. He won some big money on this. But any kind of like a 5.5, 6 inch swim bait, maybe a 7 inch swim bait, when you get down there and sometimes the fish, what's happening is they're in there feeding on smaller fish, so smaller predatory fish. So if you got crappie or little white bass or little yellow stripe in there, throwing something a little bigger can actually trigger those bigger bites. It can be miserable because you're sitting there watching all those giant or all these, your buddy in the boat or tons of fish schooling and everything. But if you're going for that one big bite, that can be the deal. Another thing I found the last little while has been a small glide bait. This is actually a 5 inch, little bitty. It's a Savage Gear Shine Glide 5 inch. This thing can be really, really killer on schooling fish as well. When they don't quite want to top water, they're not into the jerk bait, which is another thing we'll talk about. That jerk bait is another hard one to beat in the fall time when you're around schooling fish. And then finally, some kind of good translucent, often walking bait. So you can see what I've got here. Another thing I throw, old MGC custom tackle jig. Even though it's a crawl imitation, something about that bulky profile hopping through there can be a little different and again trigger that bite. But those are some of the baits that I just literally took off some rods that I've been catching fish on. Let's go through here. Yeah, Morgan, okay, so he's said on here that new 6 cent suspending lipless bait. I'm going to get a few from him as soon as possible. Milliken Fishing actually did a video on those, but I'm ecstatic to try this thing. I've always wanted, I caught a bunch of fish on the old, we're going to go over here. I'm going to look at this sucker again. Hard baits. Bear with me just a second. Yeah. Suspending thud right here. So many times, we used to catch fish on those old Bill Lewis floating rattle traps. Cold weather months, in the fall time especially, because you can pause that right in front of that fish. They're not used to seeing that. You're used to seeing something burning across the bottom, something that's wanting to sink in this particular profile. But I cannot wait to throw a lipless that suspends on some of these fish that I've got. So I'm going to get a couple of these colors from him. We're going to try that sucker out and see if we can go ahead and catch some on it. Heath, what is a thin fin? I'm not even sure what that is. I've never messed with that bait before. What's the brand of hollow body swim baits? BA Fishing asked. I'm not even going to say the brand of that particular hollow body swim bait. I actually like it, but had an absolutely horrible experience with the company that makes it. So this is actually one of the best hollow body swim baits that I've ever been able to find. But the company is in a crappy state that I don't even want to recommend it to anybody right now, to be honest with you. If you want a comparable one, go to Saudi Custom Tackle or go get them at Producer. Producer makes a good swim bait that's comparable to that one. Let's talk some more questions here. All right, we're going to go back. So, talking again here, going back to our little outline. Once you find these fish, once you get the right bait, like I was talking about, you have all these rods rigged up with all these different baits. You got one job, and that's getting the fish fired up. It's just like ledge fishing in the summertime. If you can get out there, you can get a few fish to bite. Oftentimes, it'll get that whole school of fish fired up. And sometimes I'll specifically target white bass and try to get the white bass to get fired up because I know if I can get those going, the largemouth will go as well. So at that point, it's just getting the predatory fish fired up and catch as many as you can. A lot of the name of the game in a lot of these schools, if you want to catch a big one out of there, is finding the fish for one and then just cycling through as many or filtering through as many small fish as you can. So you might catch 40 little ones and then you catch 4 or 5 big ones. So that can be a very, very important thing to do. Morgan says try the power bait hollow body. I've never tried that. I know I've tried the Strike King one. I'm not a big fan of it. I like the Zoom Swimmer hollow body a lot, so you might try that one out. But I'm going to have to try out that Berkeley one. You're going to have to convince me of that. I'm not a big power bait fan, Morgan. But anyway, so you've got to keep those school fired up. You want to catch as many as possible. It can be very helpful to have a buddy in the boat. So if you got 2 guys with 2 different baits firing that school up, catching as many fish as possible, then you have the best opportunity to catch that bigger fish. And like I said, you have to figure out what that fish is doing. So sometimes all the fish in that big school of fish are all eating little bitty shad. They're all eating the same size bait, that 2.5 to 3.5 inch threadfin shad. That happens very often, but I see so many times, especially on river systems like Nickajack or some of these creeks back in Chickamauga and stuff like that. I see so many times that all the fish are together, but the big fish, you won't see them blow up at all until the right size bait comes through, whether it's like 5 to 6 inch thread fins or 7 inch gizzard shad. Those fish will be on the right spot. They'll be on that structure with all the other fish, But nothing's happening. You're seeing all the 2-pounder schooling, 2-pounder schooling, 2-pounder schooling, and all of a sudden 5 giant fish come up and they're chasing 3 or 4 big gizzard shad. Or they're chasing a school of thread fins that are noticeably bigger than any of the other thread fins that are running. As soon as I see that, I knuckle down. I know. Light bulb goes off in my head. I need to be throwing a presentation that matches that bigger size bait and have it tied up. You know, a lot of times it's a bigger walking bait than this. Maybe it's a mega sexy dog. It's a bigger swim bait. It might even be this glide bait or a bigger glide bait, depending on what size gizzard shad I just saw, or thread fins I just saw those fish chasing. So have that ready in the back of your mind. You always want to be looking for that. But I see another thing that happens a lot, and I mentioned this just briefly before. So many times, the really big bass, they're just chilling down there, and they won't get fired up with the rest of the school until you hook one 12-inch bass, or you hook a 10 to 12-inch white bass, or you hook a small yellow bass. And it happens to me every year, a lot of times, and I say this every year. They'll come up, it'll be an 8 or 10 pounder, eat the thing off the end of your hook right at the boat. When they're keyed in on that other type of predatory fish, I find it so hard to get those really big fish to bite. And when I'm saying really big, I'm talking over 8 pounds. Really, I'm pretty confident with just the baits that I've mentioned here. In just about any school of fish, I've got a good chance of catching a 6. Got a great chance of catching 4s and 5s. But that unicorn fish in there, that, you know, there's 300 fish. There might be, 75 of them that are 3 to 5 pounds. There might be 20 of them that are 5 to 7 pounds, and there might be 5 that are just that fish, the fish that you're after. The chances of getting that one to bite are so slim, but they are in there. And year after year, I'll catch 1 or 2 in the course of the fall in those schooling fish, and it just keeps me coming back for more. I'm having a good time catching a lot, but getting that giant one there can be a difficult thing to do. So sometimes it's me going to the edge of the school, throwing a big glide bait. Sometimes it's really just sticking to something like a rig, where, for some reason a rig just draws a bigger bite. I've caught so many, 5+ pounders on this already in the fall. But again, difficult to get that giant one to eat. I had one on the other day in the back of a creek that I felt like was in that 8 to 10 pound class. And they came up schooling. So there was a school of fish that big. They weren't rockfish, they were largemouth. And I hit her on the head with the darn rig as she thumped it. And I had her on for a second until she pulled off. That's right, Morgan, the great white buffalo here. Brandon asked if I'm doing any winter cranking videos with Alex this year. Absolutely. Going to be a lot of winter cranking done this year, both on Chickamauga and a lot of the river tail race systems. I'm going to be announcing it soon, but I'm going to be doing a series this winter, really the next 6-7 months or so. And we'll call it probably like the Big 3 or something like that. I'm going to be chasing personal best spotted bass on some of the lakes around here, personal best smallmouth. I really want a smallmouth over 6 pounds. It's kind of my goal for this winter. And then, of course, as always, looking to catch that 13-pound largemouth on Chick. So we're going to talk in depth about a lot of the things that I'm going to be doing in order to specifically target those kind of fish, the kind of fish that I really want to catch. So that's pretty much all I have as far as what I do to go find and specifically target these schooling fish and how to catch big fish out of the school. So like we talked about before, figure out where they're going to be, go chase them during the bite window periods when they're most apt to feed and most apt to mess up with your bait. Throw a lot of different things, cycle through them, figure out what the fish want, and then hammer down on them. Once you get them going, hammer down. That's one of the most important things. And then I guess the very last thing I want to add to that is don't run around like a chicken with your head cut off. So many times I see, and I'm guilty of this myself, you get into an area, there's tons of schooling fish everywhere, and like I'm talking about, that big biomass of bait. It might be 100 yards wide or in diameter that's feeding fish. The worst thing you can do, they're going to be coming up sporadically. The worst thing you can do is fish over here on some schooling fish. You see them another 50 yards away. Crank up, run over there, fish for them. Crank up, run over here, crank up. And what you're doing is just spooking everything in that area. You're messing it all up most of the time. So hunker down on the best structure in the area. Know where those structures are. Try to find the key spots on those And don't get in too much of a hurry to run through your fish. You don't want to be pushing the schools around and spooking everybody and getting everybody aware of what's going on. All right, let's see some questions about fall fishing here. Questions. Yeah, but there's going to be some awesome cranking videos. Going to be breaking out that Spro rock crawler a lot. Going to be breaking out that wigglewort a lot. These are baits that really get the job done, but I don't know if y'all noticed, if y'all have been paying attention to Tactical Bassing, but they've made like a Shad Rap style bait that gets down to 18 feet. Let's see if we can find this thing. I'll pull it. Anyway, bear with me. 2 seconds. All right, here we go. Boom. That right there. See that? Wow, that was terrible. Anyway, that is a Shad Rap style bait designed by Tactical Bassing, and it gets down to 18 foot. It's got a rattle in it, but it's designed specifically for winter cranking, and I am extremely curious on what that bait's going to do for us. So y'all have to pay attention to that. I'm going to get my hands on one as soon as possible. Morgan's got them on order. I can't wait. Yeah, it is a riveter sea bait. So I'm assuming with the rattles, it's probably going to have a similar rattle system to the LV500. You know, a lot of beads in there. You can actually see on this particular bait, look how many individual BBs coming in LV500. So I'm assuming it's going to be similar to that. It's going to be a loud bait. I'm hoping they make a silent version as well. But one thing when you're talking about Shad Rap baits specifically, you know, balsa style baits, that elongated flat-sided crankbait, there are really not a lot of them made that can go deeper than 8 to 10 feet effectively. And the ones that they do make that go that deep, they're very difficult, or they get bigger. Like the presentation itself gets bigger, which in the wintertime, I like to have that smaller presentation. So really, you're wanting something about the size of that LV. You're wanting something about the size of this other little Lucky Craft here. You're not looking for that 6XD size crankbait. You're not looking for that wider wobble unless you're talking about a wigglewort style bait. These are kind of unique in that category for whatever reason. And they tend to work better on a crawfish bite, to be honest with you. Let's see here. Garrett Campbell seeded me. That's so right. Fishing like a girl. Where are they at? Been skunked the past 3 weekends on the Chick. I'll tell you right now, if you want to go catch fish on Chickamauga, you need to be looking for schooling fish, and you need to be going really, like, honestly, for me, that last hour has been dynamite. If you just want to go out there and catch a bunch of fish. So really before that, I'm kind of grinding out and fishing for one giant fish, pulling out the big swim baits, pulling out the rig. But until that last hour, I mean, I can go catch 20 in the last hour or more. Zach Bunch, yeah, a DD crank. You know, any of the Rapala DDs or DT series are awesome cranks. So, like a DT10, DT6, those are amazing baits. DT22 is actually a good wintertime bait. I know that didn't get mentioned in Tactical Bassing's video, which I was kind of curious about that. But it's one bait that really can still shine in the cold weather months, is that DT22. And that was really the only one that you could get down there. You know, 6XD has not been effective for me once you get past really about 60-degree water temperatures. Corey says water temperature is in the mid-50s right now. Should I be looking at the backs of the creeks or be looking at the mouths? Really, you have to think about you have to get away from water temperature. Where are the fish right now in their migration? And right now they are all the way up on the flats, all the way in the backs of the creek still. There's a lot of fish that are starting to transition out, but so many and a lot of bigger fish are in that back third still. You can go out to the mouths of a lot of the creeks and catch fish now, but really I would say most of them are still completely in a fall pattern, and that's what I'm sticking with right now. But it's not a water temperature thing. I think honestly it has a lot to do with the time of day, or sorry, not time of day, but length of day. The moon phase and the length of day, I think, affects the fish more than the actual water temperature. These fish, you know, they're from this area. there's so many fronts that move through in the spring and the fall, but so many times the fish, just because the water temp dropped 10 degrees, the fish don't necessarily pull all the way back out. They might pull out to the nearest drop where they are in the back of that creek or where they are on that flat, but they're still in that moat. They're going to push right back up there and do that feeding. So just kind of look around, see what you see as far as bait, and kind of do what we've been talking about in this video. The Tactical DD crank is the name of the tactical bassin crank. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. When it said DD, I was thinking DT for some reason in my mind. I flipped that over because I'm a crazy person. All right, Morgan over at Tackle Freaks, he's talking about that DC reel. So I don't know if y'all have seen the video yet, but last week I dropped a video talking about that SLX DC Shimano reel. And it's really, it's kind of like the lowest end DC reel that you can buy. Not lowest in its quality, but as far as price. You know, you can get it with the code instead of being maybe $190 or $195 shipped to your door. We can get it cheaper through Morgan at Tackle Freaks right now than anywhere. With the code BassQuest 2019, you can get that thing for, I believe, $178. So there's not a ton of those things left. So if you guys get on there, make sure if you want a chance at using one of those Shimano DC reels, I would encourage you to jump on that. I think he's only going to run that code for maybe a few more days. Maybe I think we originally thought about a week. So really, it's going to run a few more days. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you jump on it, get a hold of one of those reels. I'm still enjoying the heck out of mine. It's been an absolute blast using it. Let's see here. Brenton West said he found a massive school of shad the other day, but couldn't tell if anything was feeding on it, and he got skunked. Any advice? Well, first thing I would tell you, and we talked about this in the beginning of this video, but when you're looking at a ball of bait, you can tell a lot from what you're seeing on your graph. You can tell a lot from looking at the bait without even a graph. You see them up on the surface. So many times when you see these huge bait pods, if it's the size of 2 boats, 3 boats, 4 boats, and it's tight together, compressed into a circle or an oval or some kind of neat shape, most of the time that school of bait is under no pressure, no duress whatsoever. What you're looking for is an area when you pull into that flat or you pull into that feeding area and you see multiple small schools, little bitty schools of bait the size of half of your front deck or your front deck that are moving a lot, that are misshapen, so different angles, different shapes, because that's what they're doing. They're evading predatory fish. You're looking for those bait fish that are under duress like that. Just finding a big pot of bait means nothing. When you go over a pot of bait and your graph can't even read the bottom anymore, means nothing. All you found is a bunch of bait. You need to go find bait that's under pressure, bait that's being has fish actively feeding on it. And that's when you'll have more likely a much better chance to find it. I look for bait too that's not suspended. I want to find bait that's pushed into an area by wind. So maybe it's pushed up onto a flat. It's pushed up against a bluff wall, pushed up against some kind of edge that the fish can pin it up against and feed on them. I don't want bait out in the middle of nowhere. I don't want deep bait. I don't want suspended bait. All those are a recipe for difficult fish to catch. I want to find them in an area I can catch them as easy as possible. Smallmouth experience. Loving new hair. Thanks, buddy. I got my ears raised today. Got the old balded size. Rebecca chose my haircut. I like it a lot. Feels nice. Good feel to it. Ben asked if I'm fishing a lipless down here yet. Ben is smallmouth experience, by the way, now. Instead of Ben Nowak, it is the smallmouth experience. So if you see that, you're talking to Ben. He's my buddy from up in Michigan. So y'all need to go over there and check out his channel and subscribe. He's actually catching giants right now. Well, actually, not right now. I guess you're frozen in, aren't you, Ben? Yeah, but anyway, yeah, the fish are eating the lipless right there. I kind of mentioned that before in the video. We're getting some action on the old lipless already. But so many fish are, I'm catching a lot bigger fish on the rig right now, I gotta say. Eric from TN Bassin asked, what's the best spinnerbait? The 2 best spinnerbaits on the market, in my opinion, are the Nichols Pulsator and the Advantage Tackle spinnerbait. I think you can actually get both of those over at Tackle Freaks here. Go over there. Spinner baits. We're gonna go do a little look here. Pow. You guys get the cool screen for a second. Let's see here. I don't think he's got the pulsators yet. I like the pulsator. And then the advantage tackle here. This thing is absolutely dynamite. I know it's expensive for a swim bait, but there's something special about this particular spinner bait. And I think my favorite color is that one right there. Yeah. The gold spinner bait. It's a golden chartreuse. It's kind of washed out there because of my computer screen, but I don't know if y'all can see that very well. Spinner bait is another money bait when we're talking about the fall fishing here. Ben asked a good question here. He says, am I looking for bait or am I looking for cover grass to find the fish right now? Grass lately has not been as important at all. There are some frog fish in the grass. If you want to go have a good frog bite right now, you can definitely go do that around here on these lakes. But if you're looking for schooling fish, a lot of the schooling fish, the way the water has dropped, it's dropped so far that they're kind of pushed out from the grass in a lot of the areas I'm fishing for them. So they're pulled out maybe 30 yards off the edge of that grass. They're really on that kind of the first break off a flat is where they're kind of hanging out, and then they're pushing bait up onto it. If the wind's blowing in real hard, they'll be right up against the grass edge. But it's more bait oriented than anything for me right now, and it's hard bottom. They're up on shallow shell beds right now. They're on stumps and stuff like that right now. So those are the things that I'm looking for. Fishing the 423, asking about the DD crankbait again. I want one immediately. I need one now, right this second. So as soon as I get a hold on my hands on one, we might do a whole video. I'm going to do a video very soon just talking about winter cranking, some of the baits I use, and we're going to discuss some of the things about that bait. But I am absolutely super excited for it. I cannot wait to get my hands on one, and I intend to catch the absolute crud out of fishing on that thing this year. Eric says the Terminator spinnerbait has been good for him. I know a lot of guys that really like that Terminator spinnerbait. It just really hasn't. It hasn't done it for me yet. Hasn't been my deal yet. Joe's asking if I can go fishing Friday. Dude, I wish I could, but I can't. I'm actually going to be heading out of town Friday. So we're doing my daughter her birthday party. It's not till December. We always go early every year because she doesn't like the cold. So we're going to go celebrate her birthday party this weekend. Let's see here. Tanks Tackle has some great custom baits. And that's one thing I wish, I don't have my box of them out right here, but some of the custom, they're really wide. They're thin and they're wide profile crankbaits. A lot of them are coffin bill design. They kind of have an interesting wobble to them. Those can be money cold weather baits. They're money during this time of year. So if you can get your hands on some of these handmade baits that look like the old, I think Zoom made one, maybe Bomber had one at one point. There was a couple that were mass-produced back in the day, but it's not really happening anymore. '68 special, ready to go. Yeah, you guys don't know that, but Joe, he had one of the HUD '68 specials the other day. We pulled back into a spot, and he lost a very nice fish, choked the HUD, and broke off on the hook set. We had to watch it jump around a couple times, unfortunately. But he's all fired up and ready to go throw that HUD again. He says he's got a couple more, so maybe I'll get a hold of one of them from you, toss it around a little bit. BA Fishing, the 423 is our local area code here in Chattanooga. So I'm assuming he's somewhere around the Hamilton County, Chattanooga area. DT7 flat is old money. That is very true, Garrett. Those DT series like that are absolute money. Fishing 423, Saudi Daisy. That's where I grew up, buddy. Let's see here. He sent me a picture or something here. Let's see. Assuming it's that bait he was talking about. Oh, it's a spinner bait. 3 blades on it. That's pretty cool. Anyway, All right. Becca Bell's over here. Becca Bell, you're in the house. Are you hungry, baby? I think there's some food in the fridge, maybe. But anyway, guys, I'm going to start wrapping this up here. Like I said, check some of this stuff out. I mean, I know I kind of went through these baits pretty quickly here, but check some of these out from Tackle Freaks. I'm sure, I think last week during the stream, Morgan hooked us up with a code on there that you can use twice. So if you look at my stream from last week, look at the comments, you can use that code and figure out which that is. Let me see here. I'll give it to you. We use it twice here. But look at some of these baits. I know he's got a lot of the Hog Farmer rigs on there. A lot of the swim baits. He's got that spunk shot on there as well. So y'all need to check that out. Get a hold of some of these baits and kind of get geared up. A lot of these baits, too, it's nice because they'll transition on into the wintertime. Even, they'll be good for the next 2 to 3 months or so. And the rigs, of course, all year long. The jigs all year long. And a lot of the cranks and stuff will be good for all year long. So now's the time before things get crazy to go ahead and stock up and get ready for some fishing this wintertime. See if I can figure out what that code is. Let's see here. Dang it, I don't have the live comments on there. Anyway, I'm sure Morgan will get it to us soon. Let's see here. If I were to go out right now and could only choose 3 baits, this is a question from Ben. If I could only choose 3 baits right now, the 3 baits I would choose. Number 1, rig. Number 2 would be some kind of a big swim bait, whether it's a big soft body or a big glide bait, just because I want to catch a giant fish. And number 3, if I could only choose 1 more bait to throw right now, tomorrow, if I went out, be Scott's little scrounger. Because I know I could absolutely hammer down on some fish with that thing. That's what I would do. Those are the 3 baits I would choose right now. How deep will the fish be on chick in the wintertime? I've never fished chick before in the winter. It really depends. There's a lot of fish on the lake that'll kind of go out and pull out to the deeper ledges. So I tell people all the time, if you're a ledge fisherman in the summer and you found those fish in that 30 to 35 feet, those areas are dynamite in the wintertime. And they'll only be like 22, 23 feet in the wintertime because of the winter drawdown. But so many fish on Chickamauga and really across the whole Tennessee River because you have current, you have warmer water, you have water movement all the time. So really a lot of times our water temperatures stay around that, in the 40s. So many fish stay in the 10 to 12. So 10 to 12 foot is kind of magical on Chickamauga. So many fish stay at that depth, and there's really a lot of fish. So I would say about 25% of the fish stay less than 8 feet. About 40 to 50% of the fish stay in that 10 to 12 feet, and then probably the rest of them hang out in the deeper water. So that kind of gives you an idea, hopefully. I personally like catching shallower fish than deeper fish. Let's see here. Do I ever fish below Watts Bar Dam? Yeah, absolutely. Love fishing the tail race where Watts Bar flows into Chickamauga. Great place to do. I mean, I'll probably do some winter cranking and rig videos there this year. There's some giant smallmouth that hang out there, and there's huge largemouth you can catch there too. It's an excellent place to catch fish. Tennessee Valley Adventure. Plus Ben. Yeah, Ben, we need Ben back down here soon. I know he's got solid ice. He had a funny video the other day that I don't even think he can back a boat in anywhere, so we need him back over here. Garrett Campbell crankbait, and deeper diving crankbait. That's about right. Yeah, I can't wait to have Ben back down either. Let's see here. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to end the stream here. Hope y'all enjoyed it. If you have any other questions or anything, just feel free to shoot me an email. Not an email, but shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram. My tags are going down there right now. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram. Feel free to message me if you have any further questions. But as of right now, I mean, the pattern looks like it's going to be the same for the next few days anyway. A lot of schooling fish, a lot of warmer temperatures. And we're going to start to transition into the winter. So we'll follow those fish out. I'll be talking to you next week on the next stream. But as always, I hope this week finds you out on the water. And I'll catch you guys there.